Yes.
Yes.
Then Tanya and I get married. We're in Oakland. She's a product manager at Clorox. And I get a job as the assistant to the mayor. And I keep getting these assistant to the mayor jobs and weird jobs.
Uh-huh.
So I was in charge of community engagement. I was in charge of special events. I was just telling somebody this morning, I ran into this woman, Alice Waters, who is the pioneer for fusion cooking. When the cooking changed in 1980, she's the one that's responsible for it. And we planned an event together called the Tasting of Summer Produce. And she invited all the specialty produce growers. There are produce growers who only grow produce for one restaurant.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so they invited the produce growers, and we invited the restaurant people, and I had to. You talk about a wonderful thing. I've been able to do some really interesting things.
Okay.
So anyhow, there's Oakland, and then Tanya gets a job in Seattle with warehousing.
Okay.
Making her income more than our combined income was. Okay. In case people have got to the point where they wonder whether Tanya's black or not, yes, she is. Okay.
That part. Uh-huh.
Yes. And so we moved to Seattle, and we lived in Seattle for 20 years. I stayed at home with my children for the first 3 years of their life, which was a really interesting learning experience about how children grow and about how children learn. Mm-hmm. And I realized that the thing I had to realize is that everything I do in front of my children is a lesson about how something should or should not be done. Right? Every move I make is a lesson about how something should or should not be done. Mm-hmm. So at any rate, Seattle, Portland, the whitest cities in America. See this?
Yeah.
You see the thing? I'm going back into this thing, and now between Los Angeles, Sacramento, Oregon, the Redwoods, and now Seattle. Right? I'm going into an organization that has a level of complexity that should be different than the level of complexity that I'm used to. But anyway, the mayor started asking me to do these weird jobs. My family accused me of being the master of the ill-defined job. If somebody somewhere is going to find an odd job, somehow I'm going to end up with it. So the first of these jobs is, there's a friend of mine, Steve Agostini, working in the budget office. And he just got promoted to be the financial provost for UCLA. He was working at UNC here. And anyhow, the deputy mayor calls me. And it's always the deputy mayors that call me for some reason, other than mayors. Deputy mayor calls me and says, Mickey, we want to make you innovation director for the city of Seattle. And I'm going, what is that? And they go, we don't know. All we know is we feel like our employees at some point in time got separated from their creativity, and we are not being creative. We're making small workflow process improvements. We're just taking the things that we have and making them a little better, but we're not looking at taking quantum leaps. And by the way, this was the time when quantum physics was, when you got the dance and movie masters and Singay and all of it. You couldn't manage or be a leader unless you understood quantum physics at that time.
I got you.
Yeah. Okay. So anyhow, so they say, I said, well, what is innovation director? And then I finally get to talk to the mayor. And they think there's something funny about this. Because it's a flattering title. I mean, who wouldn't want to have innovation director on their business card? Yeah. Because it infers so much, right?
Right.
So I say, okay, Mr. Mayor, what is this? He says, well, Mickey, we want you to be an organizational irritant. We want you to run around saying, how come we still doing this way? Or is there another way to do this? But we want you to be an official or organizational irritant. And then he said, but if you're going to be irritant, you got to be a cheerleader. In other words, you just can't be irritating people and going around and criticizing people and all that stuff. So you have to be the ultimate organizational cheerleader to keep these people acid. There's this quote about the hydrogen bomb that says the hydrogen bomb cannot explode unless it's kept in a semi-excited state, unless the hydrogen molecule is kept in a semi-excited state.
Yes.
Same thing about the workplace.
Okay.
You try to keep your employees in some kind of semi-excited state because you can't go right from nothing to innovation and creativity. You have to care about the organization you're working for. On days when I like my family, all I think about is how can I make them happy?
Yes.
However, on days when they're not making me happy, I don't care. I got 12 years left. I'm gonna come to work and do my job and just get through these 12 years.
Yeah.
All right. So I was in an innovation director, and essentially with that, what happened is that we found out that the lifespan of an idea in the organization was something like maybe 3 minutes. Long enough for you to tell your boss, I got an idea, and your boss to say, that ain't your job. Or we tried that before. Or you'll never get the money to do it. But the ideas were getting vetoed in the decentralized part of the organization so that other people never really saw the ideas at all.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. And Lord knows if your idea was about something that wasn't in your department. So they created a situation where every idea had to come to me.
Sure.
And I had to respond to the idea within 24 hours because the reason people said they didn't submit ideas is because they go in a black hole and they'll never hear about it again. So I had to respond within 24 hours. And then we had to put an innovation team together to figure out how to create idea families.
Okay.
Right. So if you got an idea, let's say you're the guy who came to the transfer station and you're just dropping off something and you work in the library. Let's just say that.
Okay.
And you're looking at the transfer station and you're noticing that people come in with all this stuff and they dump it in this hole. Right.
Okay.
All right. And then because in Seattle, it rains in the summer. I mean, a lot of people have that misconception, but we get less rain in the summer than Tucson.
Okay.
Yeah. So therefore, the pit gets dusty. So they take these fire hoses and spray water on the stuff and then pay for it by weight to have them take it away. Now the stuff is heavy. Right. So where would this guy go with it? He said, and if he finally got to me, he said, and I wonder why I didn't have one of them spitzer things like in the grocery store.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And so he takes the idea and then here's what you find out.
Okay.
People can be doing some really, really stupid stuff.
Yes.
And just can't say it's stupid. They somebody tried to justify why they were using the fire hose, why that was a good idea.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And it's usually people where the change is veering away from whatever it is they do, that they have to justify that in fact they do anyhow. So anyhow, we have an idea family and idea team. And the ideas the ideas we decide to move forward with only go to the mayor. And the mayor decides.
Okay.
So your department head don't get to say, I don't want to do this. Or the manager doesn't say, I don't want to do that. No, the mayor looks at it. And if the mayor says, yes, funding comes with it.
Okay.
So there were a whole lot of things like this.
Okay.
But the worst thing was I got the most creative people I know in the city to come together. We're talking about how can we create a workshop or training to reattach employees with their creativity. The most incredible people I know in a meeting. And they tell me, Mickey, they're never going to do this. They're never going to put up the money it takes to be able to. They've shown any interest in this kind of stuff. So I leave the meeting going, well, I guess that's a bad idea, right? I call them back and I say, so I guess we're not going to meet no more. They go, what do you mean? I said, well, y'all obviously didn't like the idea. I love the idea. I'm going, well, wait a minute. And so what I found out with that is that when you're creating something new, it's very difficult for people to separate imagination from judgment. that they imagine it and then they feel like it's their responsibility to judge it.
Okay.
It's going to get judged soon enough.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to get judged in the real world. So we had to make sure that we started making sure that the ideas were separated from judgment. And we were in sessions and people were saying, well, it can't happen. No. We'll find out if it can't happen when you try to do it. The innovation director left after 4 years. City council calls me and says, Mickey, we're finding citizens increasingly irritating, and we're wondering if you can do something to make them less irritating. And I'm going, well, for one thing, I think it's citizens' right and responsibility to be irritated. If they're concerned about something, they have a right to be irritated and say, you're not like this. Okay. Well, there are professional citizens. Well, I don't know if you know any professional citizens, but I know there are some professional citizens here. There are professional citizens who don't do anything but rivalry about government.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And everything government does is wrong. And, we're not asking permission and all that stuff. So they said, can you help us create a process where community engagement in the city of Seattle is inclusionary and participatory and enabling, and in which communities of color are involved? Because the only people who came to community meetings were white adult homeowners.
Okay.
People of color only came if they were pissed off, if they were angry, or if they were afraid. Right? And the white people, it means they don't care. They either don't care or don't notice or something.
Yes.
Right? Right. So I had to try to create a community engagement system that was inclusionary, participatory, and enabling. And I don't have anything to do it right now, but that's where the green people thing comes from. Right?
Yeah,
Just when you have green people coming to public meetings and they're giving their ideas and money to green people who are making decisions about how to do policy and budget and personnel, and then you develop programs and services, it's all green.
Yes.
Yeah, which doesn't mean anything to the people who are outside that system.
Right. I understand.
All right, I'm gonna go to the next one, which was this is kind of the craziest one.
Okay.
September 2nd, 2002.
Okay.
I've been doing the community work, and the contract was over.
Okay.
The two other jobs were jobs. The community job was this project was I was a consultant.
Okay.
So I walk in, and the deputy mayor says, you got a job the mayor wants you to think about doing. And I'm flattered, and I do need to work because Tanya's decided not to work. So I said, okay, what is it this time? And they said, well, when the mayor was campaigning, he was going to cities and he was realizing that people would describe the city relative to their race and socioeconomic status. So the way the people in Central and East and South Seattle, you know what that's code for. Central, South, and East Seattle, describe the city in one way based on their circumstances, and then places like Montlake and Magnolia. I mean, you can even hear what those cities sound like, right? So, so he said, I don't want people to describe the city of Seattle according to their culture, ethnicity, race, socioeconomic status. I don't want to be mayor of that city. And I'm saying, okay, so what do you want to happen? The mayor wants you to find some way to eliminate racism in the organization of 10,000 people and the city of 500,000 people. The mayor. So, what do you do when you hear that?
I laugh.
Well, I tell you, it's flattering again.
Yeah.
I'm not smart enough to think I can't do it.
Okay.
Because I take on these things and I'm thinking of a lot of things. I'm thinking things like, why me? Because I'm not an expert in civil rights. I'm not an expert. I'm a parks and recreation person who's paid attention, right? And then I said, okay. I said, how will I be evaluated? I'm just kind of curious. If racism ain't gone next July, do I not have no job?
Right.
They said, Mickey, you got the most secure job. You got the most secure job in government if you can handle it. If you can handle it. So I started working on that, and I started thinking, okay, what do we want?
Mm-hmm.
Not what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to remember these by rote, but we don't want ethnicity, culture, or race to affect anybody's success or pursuit of happiness. That's sort of the word into it.
Okay.
We will look at ethnicity and culture as organizational assets full of possibilities for personal and community enrichment and growth.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's success in the city will be affected by ethnicity or culture.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last two might have been redundant. So, okay, I say I got a mission, right? I got a mission here. And now the question is, how do we get there? Well, this is what happens with creativity in organizations a lot,
Mm-hmm.
is that they hire somebody to do something, but they don't give you the structure.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm the only one
Mm-hmm.
who's hired to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided that the way I was going to do this is I was going to say to all 26 city departments, it's your job, it's not my job. And I want you to submit a report to me and the mayor about how you're going to approach ending racism and enriching culture. And you have to create this document and you have to submit it to the mayor. And the department heads are kind of like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this. But the mayor wanted it. And what was great about it is we got to see how people were thinking.
Yes.
So the public utility was way out in front of all of us. In other words, they were doing affinity groups, and they were doing all kinds of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
The motor pool, not so much,
Okay.
right? But we decided we weren't even going to talk to the people who didn't do it. We'd let them worry about how come we weren't talking to them.
Okay.
But we were only going to deal
Mm-hmm.
with the people who are inclined.
Okay.
I told the mayor, I was saying, I spend no time trying to convince anybody that racism's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I ain't gonna spend no time doing that. So I did that for 4.5 years.
Okay.
Toxic, absolutely toxic.
Mm-hmm.
But when you talk about growth, you're talking about learning stuff about myself
Yes.
and learning stuff about. You got innovation and change. You got community engagement and kinship, and now you got race, and then in the middle of that, or right at the end of that, came creating a plan to end youth violence in the city of Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, my solution is a Parks and Recreation solution, as it always is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, moving forward. When I was in the city of Seattle, John Jarvis, who was working at Mount Rainier National Park, his brother was the director of NRPA, National Recreation Park Association.
Yep.
And his brother suggested he come talk to me about equity since I was doing the equity work. So we sat down at a table in Normandy Park and said, what do you suppose the first question was he asked me? There's a recurring theme here.
Oh, how do we get more? Yes. Yes.
There's a recurring theme here.
Same
This
question.
is 20.
Now, this is 30 plus years.
It's 29. So
Yeah.
this is 29.
Okay.
No. This is before that. No.
Yeah.
This is like 2000. It's like 2005 or something.
Yeah. So that's 35 years later.
Yeah. So anyhow, I sit down with John and we talk, and he's doing a project to satisfy SES requirements, which is what qualifies him for executive service in the federal government. You have to go through this process. And this thing he was doing was his project about trying to find out about why Black people didn't go. And so they had a meeting where he made his report. And he and I disagreed at this moment about what he said in this meeting.
Okay.
But I don't know how I could have made this up. I really don't know how I could have made this up. Mm-hmm. So John goes through the report and he gives numbers and he gives anecdotal stories. And then John said, and these are the 3 reasons that Black people said they don't go to Mount Rainier. There's too much dirt. There's too many small animals. And the barbecue grills ain't big enough to cook nothing on.
You could have made that up. That's pretty specific.
And can you see how they would confuse dirt with soil?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
Yeah. And they don't call rats. And so, somebody told me the other day about why we don't call rats wild animals.
Yeah, we had talked about exactly. That's what you said.
Yeah. Yes. But so what they're thinking about these things as rats, and rats ain't your friend, right?
Right.
And until recently, I think every park site, almost I'd say 90% of the park sites in America are created for a family of four.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because white people got a family of four. That's the average family.
My culture.
Yeah, right. Now, I was talking to this guy from Mexico, and he said, "Should we travel with 6 people in the front of the car?"
Okay.
And what happens is that Hispanics go to national parks, a campsite for 4 people.
Yep.
Take like 15 people. They be partying. The white people trying to be quiet, right?
Right. But we both using the park, though.
You both using the park. You both got a right to use the park.
That's right.
Somebody's using the park for celebration, and somebody is using the park to acquiesce with them. Yeah. Anyhow, when John Jarvis gets designated as the director of the National Park Service, I called him to say, "Attaboy, and I'm fishing for something. I think I want to be on the National Park Service Advisory Board, or if he's going to start a committee about equity, I think I'd like to do that for him." Right. And I'm talking to him, and I said, "John, if there's anything I can do for you, let me know." And he says, "Well, I'd like you to help me find a deputy." And I'm going, "Okay, I know everybody. So what do you want this deputy to be like?" "Well, I want him to know something about the history, theory, and philosophy. And I want him to know something about youth development. And I want him to know something about innovation and creativity."
That's all.
And I'm thinking to myself, sounds like he's saying me,
Yeah.
but he ain't saying me.
Right.
And I'm going, well, maybe he wants me and somebody who has illustrated how they can manage an organization, because ain't nobody ever trusted me with money or people, except as volunteers.
Yep.
So he says, "Well, Mickey, let me cut to the chase. I want to know if you'll come back to D.C. to be deputy director of the National Park Service."
Back to DC.
To which case I said, no, I have no interest. I like my life in Seattle. I got a job where I can go home and take a nap. I can get to my son's basketball games at Oregon. That I'm accustomed to I've had 3 West Coast lobotomies, the California lobotomy, the Oregon lobotomy, and the Washington lobotomy. I'm chronically mellow. And I don't think there's no intelligent life east of I-5.
Ouch.
There's no reason for me to ever cross I-5 ever again. Right? Because I know what I go back for the summer.
What it is.
Yeah, I go back, but I have no interest. I don't have interest in that. And then my friend Rico, you met Rico.
Oh yeah.
So I told John no. And Rico, one of my best friends, like you, said, "If your mother was still alive, what would she say to you if you turned this job down?"
Yep. Oh yeah.
And then you realize this is a calling. This isn't a job.
Yeah.
And what I realized is that all of my jobs have been callings, and all of those jobs have been preparing me to do this job.
What you going to do?
Everything I've been doing, all that aggravating stuff, is God preparing me for what He wants me to do next. Right. So I decided to go.
Okay.
And John and I make an agreement because we know this is suicidal. The National Park Service is a paramilitary patriot. Well, it was a paramilitary patriarchal, male-dominated. This when you see what and it's the most racially imbalanced organization in the federal government.
Yeah.
Its workforce should be 67% Black. It's 92%. It's 92, and that's because of nepotism and just the whole.
Oh, not who said white.
Right, yeah, I'm sorry. All right. So I'm saying, John, you know what you're asking me to do? And I realize he's asking me deputy director, and that's a cool job.
Okay.
There are parts of that job that are just, the places I've been to over 200 national parks, and the people you get to meet, and you say deputy director, and for some reason it just calls up, well, he must be smart. If he's a deputy director.
Which he is.
Anytime you have mayor, governor, or any of that stuff attached to you, people give you way more credit than they should just because of that.
Sure.
So I decided to go, and I spent 3 years, worked on creating. John Jarvis had 4 pillars. I'm not going to think of all of them, right? Relevancy, diversity, inclusion, and equity. Yeah, those were his, and I worked with a group of people to create what they call RDI around those principles. We also had to look at our urban work. We had to look at the frequency by which we set aside parcels of land for people of color.
Okay.
You know, or not just people of color, but for disfranchised, for groups that we have disfranchised.
Yes.
We also had to start thinking about not just putting aside the things where horrible things happen, but promoting the things where good things happen, where white people did good things and where African American people did things and Native Americans did good things, and talking about those good things because it keeps us in the pathology.
I got you.
So it's the end of the term, and I'm at a meeting, and this woman Maureen, who the first person I was closest to in the National Park Service.
Okay.
She was like a hip white woman, the new James Brown and all. She's the one I only go talk to. Ain't nobody go talk to.
Wow.
Nobody share. Again, you understand this?
I understand that.
You understand this thing about going into a new culture and going into a new environment. And when Maureen said in a meeting out loud one time, I think we have Mickey fatigue. I knew it was time for me.
Okay.
And I had told John, when it gets to that point, was I had no conversations about it. And I wasn't finished.
Yeah.
I wasn't finished doing what I was doing, but there was no question that I was at the point now where I had to give it to somebody who was green and gray. For it to have credibility, for it to work, it had to belong to green and gray. It did not belong to me. And so I leave the National Park Service this March. I'm like totally freaked out. I think I'm about to go back to Seattle and live on my porch. Ain't nobody gonna hire me. This is when I got back involved in Christianity, and I don't know how much of that I want to talk about here.
Yeah.
But it was at that point, I watched Charles Stanley.
Oh, yes. That's one of my favorites.
And the first time I saw it, he said, anxiety is a fake battle. You either believe God got it, or you don't. Right? And at that point, I decided God got it. Well,
Okay.
for half hour.
Yeah.
Another half hour, I think he had it.
Right.
So I sent some things out, and I got a couple of responses from nonprofits. I got a response from Texas A&M University saying that they would like me to think about coming there and
That's right.
and what they were going to pay. And then I got a call from Mary Watson, who was the Dean of School and Natural Resources,
At NC State, y'all.
whose advisory board I had been on when she was at Vermont.
Yep. University.
Yeah. So I knew her. And she called and she said, why don't you think about teaching? Right. So I got 2 offers. Right? At Texas A&M, I got Ralph. I got a wife who grew up in South Central Los Angeles. Right. She had to make one of those 2 choices. She said, I don't know about Raleigh, but I ain't going to Texas. And if you've been there,
Yes.
you said Texas. It's an unforgiving place. And so we came down here, and she found this house on Craigslist.
Yep. Wow.
She found this house on Craigslist.
Wow.
And I talked to Mary Watson, and I was going back, and we decided that if she offered, we would try. And then Mary calls and says, we would like you to come be a professor of practice, and we will offer you X number of dollars. Right? She didn't know that she was offering me way more than I was making. I wanted to go, no, Mary, it's not it. So that's how I got to be at North Carolina State University. I am at this point retired. I'm working for some local departments of Parks and Recreation, San Francisco, Raleigh. I'm on the Board of Trust for Public Land and Children's Nature Network, and an environmental organization called North Bay that provides environmental education to poor people in Baltimore. And so, it's an amazing organ. It's on like 50 acres on the Chesapeake Bay. One of the prettiest places I've ever seen.
Okay.
And sometimes I wanted to go up there and just stay there because it's that. Yeah. So I'm doing board work, and I'm working on trying to get young people to understand how to live their lives as an artist.
Okay.
Why am I in Parks and Recreation? What can Parks and Recreation do? In my mind, I want people to be safe, healthy, unafraid, prosperous, literate, and to live sustainably in diverse communities. If I was in charge of a city or something like that, that's what I would want. Safe, healthy, unafraid, prosperous, literate, and to live powerfully in diverse, sustainable communities. The question becomes, what is the greatest role Parks and Recreation can play toward that end? That's the question they're asking themselves now.
Okay, and so on that, I'm going to ask us to hit pause, okay? You just heard, first the genius already told you, okay? Then explain a lot to us. Then just take and it's still what he could share, but taking us through his career, how he came to NC State, which is where he and I first met. And just to let you know that there's a lot that he and I did that I need to ask him about, okay? Because we taught together, we created things together, we've actually worked together, we presented together.
We created the solution of why Black people don't go camping at night.
We did.
The neighborhood ecology.
See, so everybody, what I want you to just realize is that I know that you're already wanting more, and more is coming. What I want to ask you to do is, when you go back and look at part one, I want you to pay attention to, of course, everything that he said, but think about the different transitions, okay, and how Mickey grew up, how that influenced him, how he hit a low spot, and how that influenced him, and how he got out of it, okay, and also how he's been to these different places and been innovative, but it's through relationship and kinship. Remember, the things that he started with in the beginning, what nature gives us, is how he has continued to do this work. So with that, this is Dr. Thomas Rashard Beasley, the hip hop forester here with my friend, brother, Mickey Fearn, okay, and we're going to be back. So stay tuned. Peace.